Welcome back, everyone, to the Madden 20 franchise series featuring Cliff Kingsbury and the Arizona Cardinals. Today we're doing our first installment of the Around the League episode. So every fifth week or after every 4 games played, we'll be doing a Around the League episode where it's no games being actually played, but rather just going around the league, seeing how the standings are, how players are playing, upcoming prospects for the draft, negotiations, transactions, stuff like that. So to kick it off, we're going to go ahead and start with our NFL standings. Looks like we already have a couple surprisingly good teams. We're going to go by each division though. So starting with the starting with the AFC North, we've got the Ravens at 3-1, which is pretty good. Lamar Jackson seems to be winning games pretty well. The Steelers and Bengals at 2-2. We play the Bengals this week. Browns are to a very rough start, especially with the talent they have. A very undermining start for them, not what they were expecting. As for the AFC South, it's still pretty close between all 4 teams. The Texans, Jaguars, and Colts all at 2-2. As for the Titans, 1-3 start for them, a little bit rough. As for the AFC East, a pretty surprising start for the Buffalo Bills at 3-1. Josh Allen seems to be getting things done there. Behind them are the Jets at 2-1. Looks like they already had their first bye week. As for the Patriots, a very high-scoring team with 112 points for, also 100 points against. So they're a pretty high-scoring team, it looks like. As for the Dolphins, a very rough start for them. 0-4, 131 points against, 83 points for. So they've just been getting pretty much beat by at least 2 touchdowns every game so far this season. As for the AFC West, the Oakland Raiders seem to be taking that big step forward with Antonio Brown, Derek Carr, and that new defense. Looks like they're really starting to take a big leap there. Second in power rankings by the looks of it. 107 points for, 94 against. As for the Broncos, Chiefs, and Chargers, very rough start for them, especially for the Chiefs and Chargers. You would expect them both to be off to a hotter start rather than 1-3. Heading into the NFC now, we've got the Bears at 3-1, Vikings 2-2, and the Packers and Lions at 1-3. Packers, I would have expected to be off to a better start. As for the Lions, that's kind of expected. Vikings, I can see that definitely. And the Bears, off to a good start this season with that defense. As for the NFC South, very surprising, very competitive division at that. They've got power ranked 1, 4, 7, and 16. All very good teams so far. It looks like Buccaneers have a pretty good defense to this point. 3-1. They are atop of their division technically. They're atop of the NFL right now by the looks of it. Bruce Arians really getting the job done for them. As for the Panthers, they also are 3-1, 4th on the rankings. Falcons also 3-1. Looks like a killer defense for the Falcons. Only 55 points scored against in 4 games, which is pretty impressive. As for the Saints, they are 2-2. Drew Brees trying to get it done. Looks like their defense has kind of taken a step back as they are 4th in their division. As for the NFC East, very competitive as well between the Cowboys, Redskins, and Eagles. Giants are just kind of in the corner eating glue right now with 54 points for and 115 against. That is pretty sure I don't know how they're not the worst team. Anyways, the Cowboys looking pretty good. Zeke's probably running the show for them. As for the Redskins, I believe they still have Alex Smith in for them. If not, then that's pretty good for them. As for the Eagles, 2-2. Not a bad start. They're right in there for the runnings. As for our division, it's very competitive so far. We've got us, the Cardinals, and the Rams sitting at 5-6 for power rankings, as you can see here. Both 3-1, like I said. Our defense seems to be pretty stout to this point. Our offense also been pretty solid. As for the Rams, killer offense. They have a lot of points scored against as well, though. As for the Seahawks, we just played them. We just beat them 20-15, so that's a good jump. Gave us a game up on them in the division. 49ers already had a bye week, so it's kind of hard to gauge how they're going to be. I still think they're going to be a good team in this division. So overall, that is the standings for the NFL right now. Right now, you can see kind of how the game has each team power ranked. So I'll go ahead and give you guys a look at that as I just kind of scroll down here all the way to 32. Alright, so unlike how I did the standings by division, I'm going to be doing statistics team by team. Might take a little bit longer, but that's okay. I know for those that are fans of different teams, they probably want to see how their teams are doing, how their favorite players are doing in the league. So to start off, we got Mitch Trubisky here. Pretty decent start for him. Their team is 3-1, so he's definitely doing a good job for them with a 95 passer rating, 9 touchdowns, 4 picks, and a 63% completion percentage. As for rushing, Tariq Cohen's up to a 4.2 yards per carry start to the season with 3 touchdowns. Not a bad job done by him. It's pretty interesting. He also leads his team in receiving yards, so he's really been carrying a hefty load for this offense by the looks of it. If we do play them, which I think we might actually be playing them. I can't remember if we are or not this season, but we'll definitely have to look to shut him down because he's having an outstanding start to the season. As for Allen Robinson, kind of picking up the slack for the other receivers, he's got 2 touchdowns and 274 yards. Khalil Mack kind of having a little bit of a slow start, I would say. 2.5 sacks in 4 games. It's not terrible, but it's also not Khalil Mack numbers. Akeem Hicks has 2 sacks as well. Only 2 interceptions for the team with Prince Amukamara and Buster Skrine. All right, on to the Bengals. Andy Dalton having a pretty rough season, I would say right now. 3 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. Not what you want to see. We do play them this week, so hopefully he keeps those kind of numbers rolling for us. We could use another win. As for rushing, Joe Mixon is having an incredible start with 8.6 yards per carry, 430 yards, and 4 touchdowns in 4 games, I might add. 107.8 yards per game. He's destroying on the ground right now. Definitely going to have to look to shut him down. Our rush defense isn't the best, so it is going to be a bit of a challenge. As for receiving, AJ Green in this league is healthy, so that's another player we're going to have to look out for sure. Leading his team in receiving all around the board with 19 receptions, 266 yards, and a touchdown. As for sacks, it looks like Preston Brown, their middle linebacker, is leading them with 2 sacks. Outside of that, they really don't have much. Carlos Dunlap off to a slow start by the looks of it. 1.5 sacks for him in 4 games. Geno Atkins, only 1 sack to show, but he does have 6 tackles for a loss, which is pretty good. Interceptions, they only have 1. That's Dre Kirkpatrick. All right, as for the 3-1 Bills, Josh Allen leading the way with a fantastic start to the season. 6 touchdowns to no interceptions. 1,100 yards and a 60% completion percentage. I'd say that's pretty good. As for rushing, LaShawn McCoy, not very good yards per carry, but he does have 5 touchdowns to show, so it looks like he's able to get it done in the red zone. As for receiving, Cole Beasley, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. Looks like he is leading the team in receiving. Lots of rack yards I might add on to that. Tyler Kroft, their second leading receiver, 263. LaShawn McCoy also getting it done in the receiving game with 177 yards. A standout player for them is Jerry Hughes at a TCU. 4.5 sacks to start off the season, which is very good. He might be leading the league, I might add to that. They've got 4 interceptions so far. 2 with Levi Wallace, 1 with Matt Milano, and 1 with Micah Hyde. As for the 1-3 Broncos, Joe Flacco putting up similar numbers to Andy Dalton. Pretty rough start for him. He definitely has the yards to show, but outside of that, 3 touchdowns to 4 interceptions and an under 60% completion percentage. Makes you wonder how much longer he will be the starting quarterback with Drew Lock sitting right behind him. As for rushing, Philip Lindsay off to a rough start as well. 3.5 per carry, still under 200 yards in a total of 4 games played. That's pretty rough. Emmanuel Sanders still able to get the job done at receiving so far. He's got 350 yards and a touchdown, which is not bad considering how badly Flacco has been playing for them. As for sacks, Von Miller is living up to his paycheck with 3 sacks so far this season. Bradley Chubb has taken another step up as well. 2.5, and their strong safety Will Parks and DeMarcus Walker also have 2 sacks. So it looks like this is one of the top teams in getting after the quarterback right now. As for interceptions, it looks like their middle linebacker Josie Jewell has 2 interceptions, 1 interception for Kareem Jackson and Chris Harris Jr. As for the Browns, who have obviously struggled and not lived up to their hype so far this season, Baker Mayfield may be part of that problem so far. He's got 5 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. Not bad, but his under 60% completion percentage at 58% probably is holding them back quite a bit. For rushing, they've got Kareem Hunt, who's done a pretty good job so far. 4.5 yards per carry, so when he gets his touches, he's able to do some damage. As for receiving, Odell Beckham Jr., without a doubt, obviously the best receiver on this team, leading his team in receiving. Not by much, though. Only 56 yards per game. 3 touchdowns, though. Jarvis Landry, very underwhelming stats here. 43.5 yards per game. In 4 games, he's got 174 yards. Myles Garrett off to an incredible start to the season. 6 sacks in 4 games was absolutely ridiculous numbers right there. So he is looking to be probably maybe even the sack leader for the season. As for interceptions, 2 for Demarius Randall and 1 for Denzel Ward. Now to the surprising 3-1 Buccaneers led by Jameis Winston and head coach Bruce Arians. Jameis off to a pretty decent start. Looks like they're off to that typical Bruce Arians aggressive offense. 7 touchdowns to 4 interceptions, over 1,000 yards passing after 4 games. 96.3 rating. So it looks like Jameis has stepped it up in his final year of his contract, looking to get that contract extension. As for rushing, Austin Eckler looks like that's a new body on the team. We will get to that once we get to transactions, but their running back has 216 yards, 3 yards per carry, so their rush game has not been effective to any matter. As for receiving, Mike Evans has been pretty dominant so far. 21 receptions, 325 yards, 2 touchdowns. O.J. Howard also lighting it up at the tight end. And Ndamukong Suh, the free agent signing, has 4 sacks, 5 tackles for a loss, but outside of that, they only have 2 other players with a sack recorded. As for interceptions, they've got 3 total, 1 with MJ Storr Jr., 1 with Sean Murphy Bunting, and 1 with Jordan Whitehead. As for us, Kyler Murray, 1,000 yards, 11 touchdowns to 2 interceptions, playing up to his first overall pick hype, I would argue, so far to this point. As for David Johnson, he does average 4 yards per carry right now, but the downside to that is he doesn't have many carries. In the last few games, he's really been struggling, so I'm curious to see how he's able to finish out this season. Kyler Murray also has almost 100 yards rushing this year. As for Chase Edmonds, pretty surprising year so far for him. 4.5 yards per carry on 11 carries, so we'll have to look to give him maybe some more touches if David Johnson continues to slack. As for receiving, Christian Kirk been dominating in the red zone so far this season. 315 yards, 6 touchdowns. As for Andy Isabella, he's got 11 receptions for 135 yards. Had that big game week 3 against the Panthers, but outside of that, really kind of been quiet. As for David Johnson, he's been pretty good in the receiving game. We might look to give him some more touches on screenplays and whatnot. As for our defense, we still continue to struggle with the pass rush, as we have noticed, even with our talented outside linebackers. It's still been a bit of a problem. Jordan Hicks has 1.5. DJ Swearinger has 2. T. Suggs has 1 sack. One player I'm kind of surprised who doesn't have many sacks so far is Chandler Jones. He does have half a sack. He has applied pressure here and there, but we expect him to be getting at least 10 sacks a season, given the caliber of player he is. As for interceptions, we have quite a bit. We have 1 for DJ Swearinger, Robert Alford, Chandler Jones, the rookie Deontay Thompson, Brooks Reed, and Tremaine Brock Sr. So overall, it looks like we're able to get these turnovers at a pretty decent rate. All right, moving on to the Chargers, who are also having a rough start to the season, not expected from them with the given talent that they have. Phillip Rivers off to an okay start, I would say. He's got 5 touchdowns to 3 interceptions with 985 yards and a 64% completion percentage. As for rushing, Melvin Gordon looks like he has come back to play with his team after holding out in real life. 268 yards, 5 yards per carry, 4 touchdowns, so it looks like he's having a pretty good start to the season. As for receiving, looks like Mike Williams is their leading receiver. Keenan Allen seems to be having issues this season. He's only got 9 receptions, obviously for almost 200 yards, but still that's pretty rough given how he should definitely, without a doubt, be their leading receiver. All right, as for their defense, looks like Joey Bosa has been lighting it up so far. 3.5 sacks so far this season with 1 interception. Not bad for him. The only other player with an interception right now for them is Trevor Williams. All right, as for the Chiefs, 1-3, even though Pat Mahomes is leading the league in passing yards. He's got 1,233, 8 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. So it looks like Pat Mahomes is not the reason they are losing games. A big reason why they might be losing games is, I would argue, their running attack right now. Obviously, they have 4 touchdowns. 3.2 yards per carry is pretty lackluster. I'm surprised they're not giving Carlos Hyde a couple more touches there. I mean, he's got 4.5 yards per carry and 2 touchdowns. As for receiving, obviously Tyreek Hill is going to be killing it. He's got 343 for 2 touchdowns. Travis Kelce also right up there for this team with 339 and a touchdown. It looks like Anthony Hitchens is their leading sacker right now. They've got a couple players with sacks so far this season, so it looks like they are able to get after the quarterback in many different ways. As for interceptions, they've got 2 with Kendall Fuller, and that's it. On to the Colts and Captain Luck here with 7 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 62% completion percentage. I forget what their record is. I believe it's 2-2, but here's their rushing game right now. Marlon Mack in his 3rd year now. 279, 4 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns. Not too bad for him. As for receiving, Eric Ebron, their leading receiver with a touchdown and 243. T.Y. Hilton, 225 yards and 3 touchdowns. Not a bad start for him. All right, for their defense, it looks like Justin Houston leading them in sacks with 3, and Darius Leonard is second for their team with 2 sacks. As for interceptions, Kenny Moore off to a great start, 3 interceptions in 4 games. Adam Vinatieri, a very unusual start for him. Yeah, he's 13 for 13 on extra points, but if you go to his field goals, he is 0 for 3, which is not good. All right, as for the Cowboys, who are 3-1 and leading the NFC East, Dak Prescott's off to a pretty effective start so far, I would say, of just about 1,000 yards passing, 11 touchdowns to 1 interception. That's a great ratio. He's got 111.3 passer rating to start the season, so he has been killing it. As for Zeke is going to do Zeke things. 500 yards in 4 games, 6.5 yards per carry, and 4 touchdowns. As for the receiving, Amari Cooper, 243, 4 touchdowns, pretty good for him. Obviously, their main attack is through the running game, so they're not going to probably see too many crazy high numbers for receivers, is my guess. But it looks like overall they're able to get the ball to many different people. Jason Witten, coming back out of retirement, has 2 touchdowns. All right, as for their defense, Leighton Vander Esch leading them in sacks with 2.5, and he is tied with DeMarcus Lawrence. As for interceptions, Jalen Smith, the quick man out of Notre Dame, with 3 interceptions. Awuzie with an interception, and George Iloka with the other one. All right, so time to find out why these Dolphins are so freaking bad right now at 0-4. It looks like Ryan Fitzpatrick isn't doing terrible. Not a lot of passing yards, I would say, but he's pretty consistent with 7 touchdowns to 1 interception. Not bad for him. As for their running game, Kenyon Drake seems to be kind of slacking. He's got 3.8 yards per carry and 2 touchdowns. As for receiving, Albert Wilson, their leading receiver right now, pretty decent numbers. 3 touchdowns on 250 yards. Kenny Stills kind of slacking, yet to get a touchdown, only has 180 yards to show. So overall, it looks like for their sacks, not too bad, I would say. They've got 2 for 3 different players, and 3 other players have sacks, so that's not too bad, I would say. As for interceptions, they've got 4 players with an interception so far. All right, for the Eagles, Carson Wentz, 7 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 60 completion percentage. Not too bad. I wouldn't say it's fantastic. As for rushing, they're absolutely horrid. They've got less than 300 yards total rushing this season and 2 touchdowns. Receiving, Alshon Jeffrey off to a pretty good start, 300 yards and 2 touchdowns in 4 games. I'd say that's pretty impressive. As for Nelson Aguilar, also pretty well with 222 and 2 touchdowns. Looks like Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham, both with 2 sacks. They only have 4 total sacks this season, which is pretty surprising considering Fletcher Cox is a high 90s X-Factor player. As for interceptions, they only have 1, and it's their free safety. Time for probably the best defense in the NFL right now in this league. The Atlanta Falcons, Matt Ryan, 9 touchdowns to 1 interception, under 60% completion percentage, but they're winning games, so it looks like he's still doing all right. As for rushing, Devonta Freeman doing what he can do, 4.2 yards per carry and a touchdown. Calvin Ridley surprisingly has more yards than Julio Jones. So does Austin Hooper, and they both have more touchdowns as well. Austin Hooper has the most receptions on the team. So it looks like a very underwhelming start for Julio Jones this season. As for the sacks, Tyler Davidson leads the team with 2 interceptions. Keanu Neal, Ricardo Allen, and I don't even know how to say that name, but each have an interception. All right, for the 49ers, another team in our division. They are 2-2, I believe, or I think they're actually 1-2. They've had a bye week, so that's probably why the numbers are probably going to be a little bit less. Jimmy Garoppolo with a 52% completion percentage. That's pretty low, but he does have 6 touchdowns to 1 interception. As for Matt Breida and this rushing attack, not very good. That's good for us, though, because our rush defense isn't very good. As for receiving, nothing really stand out here aside from Tevin Coleman, the running back, leading them in receiving and receiving touchdowns. As for this defense, D Ford has 3 sacks so far, and that's not too bad. Interceptions, not a single interception for the 49ers yet. All right, moving on to pretty much the worst team in the NFL right now in this league. Eli Manning and the New York Giants. Eli Manning off to a terrible start. I still don't know why Daniel Jones has not started, because when you start off with a 57% completion percentage, 3 touchdowns to 6 interceptions, that's pretty bad. A 66.6 passer rating is not what you want in a starting quarterback, regardless of who it is. As for rushing, Saquon, He's trying to do it, man. He's trying to do it all on his own, but with just how this passing attack is, it looks like he is not getting any help. But he does have 4.1 yards per carry and 2 touchdowns. As for receiving, Golden Tate looks like he's having an okay start. Pierre Garçon as well, not too bad. As for sacks, Marcus Golden, the former Cardinal. It's good to see him getting some numbers over in New York. 3 sacks for him. Now for the Jaguars, I do not remember what their record is, but it looks like Nick Foles is having a pretty decent start. He's got a 100 passer rating to start off the season. Leonard Fournette, a little bit iffy of a start, 3.8 yards per carry. It could be worse, however. Receiving, Keelan Cole, his 3rd year in, looks like he's putting up some decent numbers. As for Marquise Lee, he's got 3 touchdowns. All right, as for sacks, Calais Campbell, without a surprise here, leading the team in sacks with 2.5. Josh Allen, the rookie's got 1.5. 11 tackles, 2 for loss. So not a terrible start for him, but I was kind of expecting more. As for interceptions, Jalen Ramsey's got 2. Ronnie Harrison, AJ Boye, and Quincy Williams all have an interception. Sam Darnold, 6 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 59% completion percentage. Le'Veon Bell, 6.9 yards per carry so far this season. My guess is they've only played 3 games. He's got 2 touchdowns to show as well, so he's picking up right where he left off with Pittsburgh. As for receiving, Quincy Enunwa, leading the team in receiving yards, receptions, and touchdowns. As for the defense, CJ Mosley and Brandon Copeland with a sack so far. I'm surprised to see that Quentin Williams has only put up 7 tackles, 4 for a loss, and no sacks, surprisingly. As for interceptions, 3 players have an interception on this team: Jamal Adams, Tremaine Johnson, and Brian Pooley. As for Lions, who we played in week 1, 3 touchdowns, 4 interceptions for Matt Stafford, 57% completion percentage, and a 74.7 passer rating. Rushing for them has been subpar, I would say. 3.9 yards per carry, 225 yards, 2 touchdowns for Kerryon Johnson. As for receiving, Marvin Jones Jr. with 185 yards and a touchdown. Looks like sacks have not been an issue for this team, however. Trey Flowers with 3.5, Nick Perry with 3, and Damon Harrison Sr. with 2. Not to add all these other sacks here as well. As for interceptions, Trevon Wilson Sr. is the only player on this team with an interception, and he has 2 of them. All right, as for the Green Bay Packers, Aaron Rodgers and company, starting off the season 1-3, I believe, so pretty rough start for them. Aaron Rodgers, 4 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. Very unlike him to throw that many interceptions in a short amount of time. Aaron Jones, 3.9 yards per carry, 6 touchdowns. I would argue that's a pretty good start. Devontae Adams leading this team in receiving. He is an absolute beast for this team. 2 touchdowns to go along with 300 yards. All right, as for defense, Kenny Clark leading the team with 3. You got Dean Lowry with 2.5. Preston Smith and Taco Charlton each with 2 sacks as well. Couple players with a sack and half a sack. As for interceptions, looks like they've got 5 total interceptions. An interception for Blake Martinez, Josh Jackson, Adrian Amos, Darnell Savage Jr., and Jari Alexander. All right, as for the Panthers, who beat us in week 3, Cam Newton, 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions with a pretty good 74% completion percentage. I'd say that's honestly really good. As for rushing, Christian McCaffrey, who had a pretty good game against us, looks like he hasn't done much outside of that. 3.8 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns. It may have been that injury that he had against us holding those numbers back. As for receiving, Greg Olsen leading the team, 4 total touchdowns, 286 yards. He had a pretty good game against us as well. All right, as for the defense, Kawan Short with 2 sacks, Shaq Thompson and Gerald McCoy with a sack. As for interceptions, Luke Kuechly with 2. I just want to see how many forced fumbles this man has. So he's forced 6 fumbles this season, and they were all against us. How about that, right? All right, Tom Brady and the New England Patriots sitting at 2-2 right now, I believe. Tom Brady, pretty good start for him at 11 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Rushing, James White, really good start for him, actually 4.7 per carry. As for receiving, Demaryius Thomas surprisingly leading this team. Julian Edelman has 3 touchdowns. Philip Dorsett also has 200 yards. As for defense, not many sacks for this team. 2 for John Simon, 2 for Lawrence Guy, and a few here and there with some other defensive players. As for interceptions, only 1 interception so far this season, and that is Patrick Chung. 3-1 Raiders. Derek Carr, 7 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 64% completion percentage. Pretty good. Rushing, Jalen Richard leading the team in rushes right now. 218 yards on 68 carries. That is pretty bad. 2 touchdowns as well. Josh Jacobs, the rookie. I'm surprised he is not leading the team in rushes. Surprisingly enough, Ryan Grant is the leading receiver with receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns. Antonio Brown, 240 yards on a touchdown. All right, as for this defense, Sam Acho with 3.5 sacks coming out of a left linebacker on a 4-3 defense. That's pretty surprising. Romeo
Okura,
or I don't even think I knew in the first place. But anyways, he's got 2 sacks, 1.5 for Brandon Marshall, and 1 for a few other players as well. Clint Farrell, this 4th overall pick, has a sack to add to that. 4 interceptions for this team. It looks like Lamarcus Joyner, Brandon Marshall, and Carl Joseph all have 1 interception. All right, as for the Rams, Jared Goff, 11 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Pretty good start for him, I would say. 300 yards per game. Yeah, that's pretty good. Rushing, Todd Gurley doing Todd Gurley things, 4.8 per carry, 2 touchdowns. Receiving, Robert Woods, 2 touchdowns, 300 yards. Cooper Kupp, 270 yards and 3 touchdowns. And Brandon Cooks with 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. So they're really killing it on offense right now. Aaron Donald with 3 sacks, no surprise there. Samson Ebukam, I don't know how to say that last name. 1.5 sacks. 1.5 sacks for Michael Brockers. Corey Littleton also has a sack. As for interceptions, Aqib Talib with 2 and Marcus Peters with 1. All right, here goes the Ravens. Lamar Jackson having a pretty good start to the season passing-wise, already over 1,000 yards. That's pretty good considering, you know, how he is in real life. As for rushing, Mark Ingram, 3.6 per carry. Kenneth Dixon, 4 yards per carry, pretty good. Surprisingly, Lamar Jackson only has 2 rushing attempts this season. Now, I'm pretty sure that's just because of the way Madden simulates. I believe they somewhat fixed it in this last patch, but I don't know if it's going to apply to this league or not. As for receiving, Seth Roberts with 253 yards and a touchdown. Willie Snead with 5 touchdowns. That's a really good start for him. 240 yards for him. All right, for their defense, Pernell McPhee leading the way with 3.5 sacks. Michael Pierce, 2.5 sacks. For interceptions, Patrick Onwuasor. I don't know how to say that last name. I'm sorry. 1 interception for him. Case Keenum off to a surprisingly incredible start for the Redskins. That's good for them, I would say. He's got 10 touchdowns to 3 interceptions, a 70% completion percentage, averaging over 300 yards per game, which is very impressive, especially for a team like the Redskins where they like to check it off, ground and pound all day. As for the rushing attack, Adrian Peterson still carrying the weight for this team. He's got 3.6 per carry, though, which is kind of low. Darius Geis looks like he really hasn't gotten an opportunity, but with 5 carries, he's got 2 touchdowns. All right, as for receiving, Paul Richardson Jr. leading the way with 91 yards per game and 2 touchdowns. Pretty good. Josh Doxson with 3 touchdowns and Jordan Reed with 2. All right, defensively, Ryan Kerrigan, the longtime Redskin, with 3 sacks already. Pretty good start for him this season. Matthew Ioannidis, 2 sacks. Good for him. Jonathan Allen, the stud out of Alabama, with a sack. And a few half sacks here for a couple other players. As for interceptions, only 1 interception so far, and that's for the newly signed Redskin, Landon Collins. 12-13, 300.3 yards per game for Drew Brees. Definitely carrying his weight. 7 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. As for rushing, Alvin Kamara, 4.5 yards per carry, 3 touchdowns. Receiving, Michael Thomas lighting it up with 311 yards and 4 touchdowns. Ted Ginn Jr. also still getting it done for them. All right, as for sacks, not too many, only 4 total sacks for this team. 2 coming from Cameron Jordan and 1 coming from Sheldon Rankins and Marcus Davenport. As for interceptions, only 1, and that's by their middle linebacker. All right, as for the Seahawks, another team in our division, I believe they are 2-2. Russell Wilson, 7 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. Pretty low completion percentage for him. Also very low yards per game from him as well. As for rushing, Chris Carson looks like he's getting it done for them in the backfield. 4.2 yards per carry and 2 touchdowns. Not too bad for them. As for receiving, Tyler Lockett leading the way with a touchdown and 200 yards. As for this defense, Robert Kimdichie, who seems to have been signed after we released him, gets picked up by the Seahawks instead of the Dolphins like in real life. But he does lead the league. He does lead the team in sacks, though, with 2. KJ Wright, Al Woods, and Jaron Reed also have a sack. As for interceptions, there's 4 total on this team, 1 by Bobby Wagner, Bradley McDougald, Eric Berry, and Shaquille Griffin. Steelers, Ben Roethlisberger, 60% completion percentage. That's all right, not very good, I would say. 5 touchdowns to no picks and a 96.8 passer rating. As for rushing, James Conner getting a hefty load of the carries, 80 already this season. 4.4 yards per carry on 2 touchdowns. I'd say he's doing a pretty good job for them. As for receiving, Juju Smith-Schuster leading the way with 291 and a touchdown. As for defense, Devin Bush leading the way, the rookie middle linebacker, getting it done for them. Also has 24 tackles, 2 for a loss. Stephon Tuitt with 2 sacks as well. Vince Williams, Cameron Hayward also with a sack. As for interceptions, TJ Watt, Bud Dupree, Mike Hilton, and Sean Davis all have 1. All right, as for the Texans, 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 52% completion percentage. Pretty rough start for Deshaun Watson, I would say. As for rushing, Lamar Miller, who actually just tore his ACL in real life. In this league, he is averaging 4 yards per carry and 2 touchdowns. Pretty good. Donta Foreman, kind of doing a pretty good job as that second complimentary back. He has 4 touchdowns. For receiving, DeAndre Hopkins leading the way, trying to do what he can. It looks like the passing game has been kind of struggling to this point, so we'll see how that pans out. J.J. Watt doing J.J. Watt things, 4.5 sacks for him. Also a sack for Jahleel Addy, Tashawn Gibson Jr., DJ Reader, and Jadeveon Clowney. As for interceptions, Aaron Coleman has 2 and Bradley Roby has 1. 6 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 56% completion percentage for Marcus Mariota. Dion Lewis leading the way in rushing for this team right now, which is pretty surprising. I'm surprised that Derrick Henry is not the leading rusher for this team. But he's got 3.5 yards per carry. If I were them, I would put Derrick Henry at number 1. If a guy's struggling this badly, 3.5 yards per carry, to me, I would say that's not acceptable. So I would argue that they should put Derrick Henry in as the number 1 back. As for receiving, Delaney Walker leads the way with 257 yards, 2 touchdowns. Adam Humphries has 3 touchdowns. Defensively, not many sacks for this team. Actually, only 4 to show. Harold Landry III with 2. Cameron Wake with 1. Jayon Brown and Wesley Woodyard also with half a sack. As for interceptions, Jayon Brown also has 1. Wesley Woodyard has an interception. And Malcolm Butler has 1. All right, last but not least, the Minnesota Vikings, Kirk Cousins and company, starting off the season 2-2. Kirk Cousins averaging about 260 yards per game and 5 touchdowns, no interceptions to show. Pretty solid start for him, I would say. As for rushing, Dalvin Cook, a pretty underwhelming start. I would expect better from him. Only 3.6 yards per carry and a touchdown. As for Amir Abdullah, 3 touchdowns for him, but under 3 yards per carry, which is pretty bad. As for receiving, Stephon Diggs leading the way, 285 yards and a touchdown. Surprisingly, Adam Thielen only has 117 yards, 9 receptions, and 2 touchdowns, which is pretty bad considering he's played 225 downs so far this season. So it looks like he's kind of taken a step back after signing that big contract. All right, as for the sacks for this team, it looks like they have 3 players with 2.5. So Everson Griffin, Linval Joseph, and Danielle Hunter, all with 2.5 sacks. Ron Parker also has a sack. As for interceptions, 2 for Xavier Rhodes and 1 for Ron Parker. And I'll go ahead and scroll through the league leaders. I'll show you, here's the league leaders for passing right now. And here is the league leaders for rushing. Here's receiving. Surprisingly, Paul Richardson leading the way in receiving. Did not see that coming. Looks like we've got Christian Kirk up there. That's good to see. Here's our league leaders in tackles. League leaders in sacks. And league leaders in interceptions. All right, so we're going to start back here to week 2. Looks like the Buccaneers traded right linebacker Jason Pierre-Paul to the Packers in exchange for a 3rd round pick and a 6th round pick in this upcoming draft. So that's a very interesting trade right there. Looks like the Dolphins also traded Jakeem Grant to the Packers. And it looks like the Packers traded away Kyler Fackrell in exchange. It also looks like the Packers traded away, or the Packers also got a 6th and 7th round. So overall, not too many trades for this league so far, but it's good to see that there is at least a few. as for re-signed players, there's already so many of them, so I'm really not going to talk about every single one of them. I'm just going to kind of scroll, and if there's anyone that's crazy, I'll go ahead and note it. To start off, looks like Jadeveon Clowney got signed to a fat contract, 5 years at $94.5 million. Matt Breida gets signed a 5-year deal to the 49ers for $30 million. That's a pretty long deal, especially for a running back. This is a insane contract. 1 year for $36.1 million for one more year of Phillip Rivers. That's insane. If you thought that Phillip Rivers' 1-year deal was insane, Tom Brady signs a 1-year deal worth $41 million. That is crazy. Amari Cooper signs a pretty good contract, 4 years for $65.3. Jalen Smith also gets signed, just like he did in real life. That's good to see. $45.6. And also Sean Lee, 2 years for $37. A lot of big contracts going to the Cowboys. Dak Prescott signs a fat contract of 5 years for $129 million. It's not a $40 million man, but hey, that's a pretty good contract. Jameis Winston also earns his re-signed contract, 5 years for $116 million. All right, and that's just about it for the re-signed players. Now we're going to go ahead and jump into scouting. We're going to look at the prospects that I've looked at so far. I've been trying to find a decent draft class that isn't going to have overwhelmingly good rookies, and it's really just been a struggle for me. So I've just went ahead and gone with an auto-generated draft class. So as of right now, I'm just going to kind of scroll down the top 15 picks to show you guys who's kind of at the top right now, and I'll go ahead and show you my draft board afterwards. All right, as for my draft board, I really don't have too much so far, but these are what I have. I've got a center and all of these left tackles. I really want to focus on building this offensive line. I don't want an Andrew Luck situation with Kyler Murray. That would not be good, to say the least. The player I really want the most, I'm going to say, is probably Will Green or Jeffrey Rayner. Jeffrey Rayner looks like he might go later in the first round, or probably maybe even the second round, even though he has first round talent. All right, and last but not least, we're going to go ahead and negotiate with a few players here. I'm going to hold out on a couple of these guys just because they may retire, so I want to see kind of what they want at the end of the season. Larry Fitzgerald being one of those guys. He wants a 2-year extension. I don't know if he'll be around then, so we're going to kind of wait on that. As for Marcus Gilbert, I think he definitely will still be around at age 33. 2 years from now. So I think we are going to go ahead and sign this. It'll kind of fill in that hole so we can work on other positions while he is able to still be a decent starter for us. So we'll go ahead and offer him this contract. And it looks like he likes the contract length, but the rest of the offer needs work. All right. As for DJ Swearinger, obviously we want to keep him around. He wants a 4-year deal. So we'll go ahead and offer that. We'll kind of bump it up a little bit here. Give him 5.5 salary and a $3 million signing bonus for a total of just about $34 million, and he accepts it. Good to see. Terrell Suggs, another player I want to hold off on. I want to make sure he actually is around at the end of the season instead of just signing a contract and retiring. Charles Clay, I'm kind of skeptical on right now. He wants a 4-year deal. That's a little bit lengthy for me. I want to see how he plays this season. We've also got Ricky Seals-Jones, who I kind of want to take and step into that starter role. As for Brooks Reed, I kind of want to evaluate if it's worth keeping him because he wants $14 million for 2 years, and I want to kind of see what kind of playing time he's going to get behind Chandler Jones. As for Max Williams, I think we're also going to want to sign him. I like these two tight ends as a good duo. And the rest of these players, I don't plan on re-signing DJ Humphries. Kevin White, I don't plan on re-signing either. Other than that, a couple of these players, we'll have to see how they play. Brett Hundley may be a guy we want to keep around. Probably not for that kind of money. All right, and that concludes the first Around the League episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know it's a little bit lengthy, probably really boring for a lot of you. I will go ahead and put timestamps in the description for your team, your favorite team's stats. If you watch through the whole thing, well, good on you. But I probably will have the next game versus the Bengals up this week as well, so stay tuned for that. Also, a quick side note, I will be playing full games from now on every week just because we've just all discovered after last episode that simming really kind of messes up the game for whatever reason. So from now on, I'm going to be playing offense and defense for every single game, every single week. It's going to be fun. I'm going to lose games. I promise you that. But outside of that, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time, Week 5 against the Bengals.